Welcome back to another episode of the Start Thinking Forward podcast, the show where we dive deep into the strategies, systems, and mindsets that propel you and your business into the future. I'm your host, Brandon L. Draper, and I could not be more excited today for this episode. We have a powerhouse guest with us today, someone who's not just talking the talk, walking the walk when it comes to transforming small businesses and medium-sized business into thriving enterprises. She's a global business strategist, a sought-after speaker, and a true champion of entrepreneurs. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Carrie Anne Powell, with over 20 years of experience spanning law, lobbying, fundraising in Washington, D.C. Kerry Ann has raised an astonishing $120 million for the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. She's the founder of the Trafalgar Strategies, and she also has a team advisor business owners on how to not just survive, but thrive in today's complex business. Carrie Ann has been featured in the international platforms like Working's Women Magazine, Dallas Leadership Foundation, and has even worked with moguls like Russell Simmons. She is here today to share her wisdom. Welcome, Carrie Anne Powell. How are you today?
For that great introduction, Brandon. So I do strategy. That's what I do. I'm all about it. I really believe if you're trying to make something really big happen, then you need to have a good strategy around it. Of course, execution is important. So I've been doing that for all of my career, from when I first came into college, my first job as a fundraiser, and all through doing lobbying and impact litigation in Washington, and then going right back to fundraising, where I built the Martin Luther King Memorial. And so, once I finished that, I jumped into starting this business where I've been doing it since 2014 and helping small and medium-sized companies become more strategic.
Okay. So can you share a bit about your journey from being a, Washington, D.C. attorney, lobbyist, fundraiser, and becoming like this global, business strategist that you are today with the team and everything?
Yeah, well, the journey, people, Brandon, you know how it is. People want to think there's some sort of, big glamorous step that one took. The reality is, when I finished building the Martin Luther King Memorial, I really didn't know what I wanted to do after that. Because initially when I went into doing it, I thought, I'll go back into law and lobbying once I was finished. But, you take one path and then, you kind of, there's another path ahead of you. So I knew I wanted to go into business full time, because I was getting all of these different headhunters reaching out, organizations, after doing this major project, but nothing really got me excited. All right. So initially I just kind of started doing some strategy with large NGOs because of my background. So they would call me and say, hey, can you, help our board of directors do this, big thing, and, help us create a good strategy around it. So I started doing that. And then as time went on, I realized that what I really enjoyed doing was working with the CEOs of the organizations themselves, and helping them really go from sort of top level, high level thought processes into how does one lead a team and make those strategies, working with CEOs particularly, and leaders within the organization. However, what I did find was that all of these folks had great ideas. I mean, we can come up with the best of it all, right? Wonderful strategies to begin, putting something into place, a big idea, as I like to always call it. But then you begin to realize that 67% of strategies fail because of poor execution. And so you begin to look and see, well, what's the problem with this poor execution? And I find that there are some chaotic symptoms that show up in business. And there are some fundamental reasons that are causing those chaotic systems that are also symptoms that are also causing the reason why you can't execute. So I really began digging into that a bit and realized that's what I really wanted to focus the business on. So when I launched full time in 2014, I was like, okay, how do I really want to use my skill sets and how I want to make things happen and help people, and leaders based on what I've experienced. And so that's kind of how it originally started. And it evolved over time. I had happened to have a great deal of contacts coming out of building the memorial. So I was able to build it based on my my referrals and such. But as time went on, I really began sort of anchoring into what it was we were doing, building a good team, making sure that we were able to find the kinds of clients that we really, really enjoy working with. And that's kind of how I became this sort of champion of small business, because I realized in the end, right? I mean, I still work with NGOs, but in the end, I realized when you start looking at the economic growth in our countries, what supports our infrastructure and local communities, when we start looking at how we're going to, develop real strong economic base for our world, it comes from evolving businesses that are growing and are scaling. And when you start looking at the stats on what happens with businesses, we've got a 10-year, 70% failure rate. Then I realized, yeah, this is kind of where I like to hang out. This is my space. This is what I like to do. I'm not only helping people make money and, impact their employees and impact their customers, but it's also impacting the economies. And frankly, to be honest, when you start looking at pulling people out of poverty, there's no other better way. So that's my journey.
Okay, you spoke on a few things. So when you talked about poor execution, what are some of those like systemic things to look for when you start having poor execution? Because you mentioned that there are some telltale signs. Can you go in a little in depth about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I have found based on my work, I think there's basically 8 symptoms, or in America, it's 8 culprits that cause chaos in a business. One is sort of the fundamental things that are happening in the business, the boring stuff. Yes. Looking at, a lot of folks are like, oh, well, we're having a cash flow issue, blah, blah, blah. It's because our sales team isn't going well. But really, is that it though? Right. Because what I have found is sometimes it's really a product market fit. They thought they had it, but didn't really, right? They thought they have a good sort of way that they're, formulating their products, and it's not working very well. It could be even fundamental where the founder, the owner, has a misalignment with the business. So their life plan is misaligned with the business vision. That alone can blow up a company. So those are the things that people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about my life plan. It's so boring. It's not businessy. Well, guess what? If you don't have a strong life plan that is aligned with your business, and then Brandon too, when we start talking about life plan and business vision, people be like, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and tweak my life plan. No. The life plan comes from the innards. Yes, it's who you are as an individual. So you tweak the business vision, and just because the business vision worked for you once, 10 years ago, doesn't mean it works for you now. So there are a lot of things that even the business model sometimes is wonky. So those are the fundamental boring things, and I always put them in sort of the basic step 1 kind of assessment when I'm talking to a business. But then there are 7 others. We're looking at leadership. Is the founder, the CEO, the owner, are they leading well? And I also look at leadership in 3 prongs. You've got your leadership of yourself, your leadership of your team, and the leadership of the organization. So those 3 things encompass leadership. I have found so much just having a lack of leadership capacity is one of the main reasons why these things don't get executed well. And I often think about leadership too. People always think, oh, someone's a born leader. That is hogwash. Let me tell you, people learn leadership skills. So if you don't think you're a good leader, learn them, learn the skills. Now, of course, if you grew up in a home where there were leaders and you sort of observed it, much like language, right? You can acquire some leadership skills. And that's what people think, oh, that person's a born leader. No, they acquired leadership skills by observing. But learning to be a good leader is a skill that everyone can learn. And if you're not doing it well in your company, I guarantee you it's showing up in your bottom line. So that's number 2. And then there's number 3 is being able to attract and provide the environment and the training for strong teams. you must have a strong team. And, Brandon, what ends up happening with, particularly with, small businesses, and as they begin to scale, they kind of hire people based on personality. It's sort of like, oh yeah, cousin Susie knows how to do this, so let's bring her in. And, my best friend from college is good at this, so let's bring him in. And next thing you know, you have this hodgepodge of team members that are no longer like, they can't grow with you. And so a large part of what I do with, and this happens with some of the large organizations I've worked with, their teams are not working well. They didn't hire well. They're not, leading them in a good way. And so this is not an issue just being small or medium sized, but if you're not having a strong team, there's no way you can execute very well. So those are 3. And then we've got whether or not you have a strong strategy. So that'll be 4. Number 5, when that you have systems and processes. And then you've got whether or not you have a particular style of executing. So this goes back to, do you have a standard in your company by which you decide that this is the level at which we execute? And I think that's really one of the big problems too. It's sort of like, oh, we'll let that slide. And then when you say, let's let that slide, then everybody slides, everything slides. And you have problems with that. And then of course, there's the optimizing and innovation in the company. If you're not optimizing your systems, if you're not optimizing them in the ways that you do things, that falls through. And then at the end, you've got the success mindset, meaning you, not just you, the leader, but also your team. Are you creating an environment? Are there practices within the organization that keep people at a high peak state and they're able to think successfully, as opposed to, if the problem comes forth, is it always, oh, the sky is falling, or how do we fix this? We can address this. And so those are the main 8 ones that I've seen when there's lack of execution that pops up. And there's some things that people can do to fix that. But in the end, one needs to be able to recognize that it's not working at first. And I think that's the problem where this is a big conversation happening in business right now. The strategic execution gap. It's a big thing. It's not just in small businesses. It's everywhere. And everyone has a theory around what's going on there. But the problem is that people can't tell, because they're not tracking, that there's an execution gap. So it only happens when they finally do their annual meeting. They're like, oh, look at this. We didn't hit our sales goals, or whatever the thing is that they were trying to do. So I think it's really important to always be paying attention to those numbers, creating a way to measure them so that you're knowing on a weekly basis, are you moving towards your strategy? And if you're not, what do you need to fix immediately?
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially when you're talking about measuring, and that's one thing that that I've learned in the military, is that idea of, if you can identify a problem, if you have no way of looking at it from a numbers point of view, analytically, you're not able to even identify that you do have a problem. So coming up with a way to measure these things is so important. Do you have any or maybe a tool that maybe thought leaders can use to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Got a ton of them. So what I often say is, once I help folks sort of develop a strategic plan and they have all of and when I say strategic plan, I don't mean just, oh, we've just created our 15-year goal and that's it. Going all the way down to what are the KPIs and what are the metrics that people are looking at on a daily basis. So once you sort of have that in place, now you can just simply use a spreadsheet. Some people still do. It's okay. However, I recommend, particularly, if you're an enterprise, if you're an enterprise leader, then you have the resources to really sort of, bring in a great deal of sort of, tools, technological tools, to be able to have everyone kind of moving forward. But there's some really, right now with technology, there's some really great ones on the market. One of which I often use with my clients is 90IO. It's an affordable tool, and any business can and what I've done with 90IO is basically have them, reformulate based on how I do my strategic planning. We upload stuff into 90IO, and each person literally has their actual daily tasks their actual data, and the leaders have their responsibilities, and everything moves up to the top dashboard where the CEO is looking to see. So every week people are going in and saying, okay, did this happen? How close are we with this particular, project? How close are we with this particular task? How close are we with whatever the thing is? And people are like, whenever I talk about stuff like that, people are like, oh my gosh, people are going to feel so micromanaged. No, they're actually now owning the part of the business that they're a part of. Because remember, you start doing strategic planning, you bring everyone in that process. You don't just all of a sudden decide, oh, we're going to do, all go ahead and have golf on a weekend and then come back like the 10 commandments and give the strategy to everyone. You want to be a part. It comes from the bottom part of the organization. Therefore, everyone owns it. And once people own that, then they're owning their part of making the vision happen. There's also a really great tool, Cascade, that I have used in the past. There's a good one called Rhythm Systems. I mean, there's just so many out there right now that one can use, and depending upon how robust your business is, I know with Rhythm Systems, I like them because they're able to customize based on your business. And so, if you need more things, if you have inputs coming from, say, your sales management tool, that can just automatically, without having to use what's the tool? I always forget, but they actually create links that bring that data in. If there are, things coming in through your HR stuff, they can link that in. So if you have a more robust, larger organization, Rhythm Systems is a good tool. But if you are just sort of, somewhere within, say, 100 employees and below, 90IO can work quite well for you.
Okay. So, a lot of people look at the trajectory of business, the economy, looking at the Fortune 500. It seems like you have more of a perspective where you're looking at the Fortune 5000. So why do you believe small and medium-sized businesses are so crucial to the world economy?
Brandon, it's just a simple math issue, okay?
Mm-hmm.
For us to grow economically, we need to be able to have an increase in goods and services, right? So large corporations, God bless them, but they might be able to grow a smidgen, but they're hitting the top of where they can be able to grow. Whereas small and medium-sized companies still have way more capacity to increase in terms of growth. And so if you're looking for how much you can grow, which is what increasing the GDP is about, then that's where you want to invest. Now, the other thing is 2/3 of people in the United States work for a small and medium-sized company. 2/3, which means that's the majority, that's more than the population, right? That's the majority of the population. So if you're trying to think about if you can make sure that these individuals continue to be employed, therefore out there purchasing items, therefore adding to the economy, what do you want to do? You want to invest in the employers of 2/3 of the economy. And let me just tell you, this is not in the US, this is actually lower. The rest of the world, the number is higher. And so, and then we also think about 90+% of businesses are small and medium size. And so we really need to start thinking about this. So someone might come and say, well, Carrie Ann, only, I think that I don't know what the number is, but it's, there's a very large percentage of small and medium sized companies that don't have employees. Yeah, that's true. That means that if we invested in them, my Lord, they can get more employees, right? I mean, it's an issue of mathematics. I know it's not sort of sexy. It's easier for us to kind of say, let's give a good amount of money over to, large corporation over here so that they don't fail because they're a blue chip company, blah, blah, blah. And that makes sense. I'm not about, I'm not trying to say it's either or, but there's money for all. And if you want to be smart about how we're investing, not just in money, but in terms of resources, making sure that we're creating policies that support small businesses, this is the way to go.
Okay, so I hate to throw this one at you, but it is, this is something that's kind of like real in time situation, but it still correlates with one of the things that you're always talking about. So one of the recent interviews I think I saw you on, you were talking about how the potential for explosive growth in 2023. Well, it's getting ready to be October. You know, a lot of physical years start switching over. So let's go towards 2024. What do you see small businesses going, these small and medium-sized businesses? And also, if you can take in consideration that due to a recent report, this came out and said most Americans will be out of money by October. And on top of that, the student loans will start, the payments will start coming back due. What do you think how you think that's gonna affect small and medium-sized businesses?
Well, it will affect them. But remember, small and medium-sized businesses, a lot of them are actually selling in to large corporations. Let's just be honest, right? So, and I'm sorry, but no matter how much they scream, no, uncle, they have the resources. So they're still having to invest because they can't not continue to invest in their businesses. So there's a large number of corporations, particularly the ones that I work with, that sell into large corporations. They also sell into the federal government. They also sell into state governments. They also sell into local governments. So you start thinking about that. So you're not only looking at consumer stuff, okay? So there's that. Also, too, you look at look at what happened this year in terms of like just even the industry of travel. Folks were everywhere. So I split my time between Spain and the US. And so I cannot tell you, I could not walk in my neighborhood in Madrid without seeing an American. Okay, I'm like, and I live in a neighborhood. Like, I don't live I live in the city, but in the center city, but in a cute little neighborhood. I'm like, well, hello, they were everywhere. Everyone's taking some picture in front of somebody's cathedral in Europe. Okay. So they were saying that the economy is going to drop. The American public said, oh, no, we're not. We're traveling. And if they weren't traveling, they were going to go see Taylor Swift. They were seeing Beyonce. They were seeing all of it. So there is something, I think it was a CEO of Kellogg that said the cure for the economy this particular year was the American consumer. So yes, you can look at it two ways. One way is a lot of small and medium-sized companies are selling into corporate. They're either, they could be even just cleaning the buildings or whatever the thing is. So there's that element. Corporate's going to always spend because they're not going to go down. Okay. Then you start looking at consumer businesses. People are still buying. People are still selling. There's nothing to say that, it's not like I'm ignoring the realities. However, if you begin to see patterns, I still think that there is hope. Now, of course, our small businesses now, as opposed to start being all, hey, the world's like your happy place. Let's start spelling frivolously. No, what small businesses need to be doing right now, and they need to be doing that even if it's an economy and it's a recessionary year, or if it's not, what they need to be doing is perpetually looking and seeing, what are the things that we can shed. I always talk about scaling light. There are some things that you needed to have in the business, expenses, early days. But as you begin to grow and say, what are those things that you can trim the fat on? And what are the things that are necessary, that are core? But you don't want to not be investing in the things that are necessary and the things that are going to help you grow. But some things you can begin to trim the fat on. The other thing is you also want to be thinking about partnerships. That to me is really the way, particularly in the small and medium size. But if you look at it now, major corporations are perpetually partnering. There's collaborations everywhere. You see it not just in fashion, you see it everywhere. And so small businesses need to be thinking about how to collaborate and how to begin to partner with other businesses. And you don't have to just go to another small business. You can go and collaborate, shoot for the skies. You might go with one of the big dogs. Who knows? You might have a great product, a great service, in that you can collaborate, develop partnerships. So my whole point is for small and medium-sized businesses, first, take stock of what your cash flow situation is, okay? So you can't just be walking all willy-nilly with your eyes closed on the ground and saying, the world is happening. You need to be clear about what's going on in your cash flow, making sure you have some cushion, and then start trimming the fat in ways that you can, but not in ways not the things that are going to invest in your growth, but the things that are just sort of heavyweight. And then third, begin thinking about partnerships and collaborations.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the concept of the reluctant leader in the context of a small business?
The reluctant leader. I I just find that sometimes, look, some folks are entrepreneurial like at heart, right? There's many different characteristics of an entrepreneur. Yeah, there can be, everyone's an entrepreneur if they're an entrepreneur. However, some folks are more sort of, I'm the star, and they need to kind of show up a bit way. And some folks are more managerial and executionary, and some
Mm,
are just entrepreneurial in spirit, and they're just sort of like
mhm,
risk taking. They do the thing, whatever. The reality is, however you started your business, not everyone starts their business starting out thinking, oh, I'm going to have this large strategic plan, a future, blah, blah, blah. They're like,
mhm.
I need to start a business because I want to feed my family, or I have this great idea. I'm just going to jump into it. In the end, though, regardless of how you got here, you got here. And you are a leader of a team. You are a leader of an organization that has stakeholders, your employees, your customers, folks that invest in the company, you. And so therefore, if you realize that one of the things that you lack is the capacity to lead well, I'm sorry, but you are a leader. It's kind of like, those basketball players are like, I'm not a role model. Oh, yes, you are. Go ahead and fix that situation because you are. You didn't ask for it, but that comes with the package. Running a business also means that you are a leader. And therefore, and again, people have this idea of, leadership as whoever they thought was the leader growing up. So that's their idea of leadership. That's not really it. There's many personalities around leadership. The bottom line is you're leading an organization, you're leading a team, therefore you must lead yourself.
Exactly, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, wholeheartedly with that. So, how can business owners, and I'm not trying to set you up for a cheesy plug here, this is being honest, but how can business owners manage their operations without feeling like they're in the middle of a storm? Like, and I mean, as a business leader, like myself, there's so many times where you got your hands in so many different things. There's smoke over here. There's a little fire brewing over there. So many things. So I feel like you're in a storm. It's like, when am I ever going to come up out of this? So can you talk about some tools or support strategies or some, maybe some
Yeah.
mindset? So.
Well, the first thing is to recognize those 8 things that I talked about earlier. I know I ran
Mhm,
through them real fast and real quick, but they really are the principles that by which we operate in our business, in terms of when I start looking at a business that's feeling chaotic, tornado, blah, 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 I go right back to assessing how we're on a scale from 1 to 10. And we assess it, right? Here's where this company is on this, that, or this. So a large part of it is you just, I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult when you have the storm of brewing. You're like, well, looky here. I need to focus on the storm so I can get this to be fixed. However, that's when it's good to pause and spend some time reflecting a bit. And I know that it doesn't feel good at that time because you're like, I got things to do. However, you're going to always be in the storm if you don't stop and assess. So I'd like to first encourage you to assess what is actually happening, not what's happening. Because when you start focusing on the thing that's happening, you get into a weird mindset. And remember, there are some things that are some bits of, and this is like a side note. There are stages of business. Yes, it's sort of like a bit of
mhm,
a bell curve. Depending upon where you are in whatever stage of business that your business is at, some of the things that are popping up that I call chaos could be chaos that's just normal for that stage of business. So a part of it is about understanding that this is the stage of business that you are in. But that's just like a
mhm,
sidebar. However, perpetual chaos is not okay, regardless. So a part of it is assessing, okay, is this just, teenage angst happening, or is this a major problem and my teenager is going to go on drugs? Right. So that's the stage that you're at. You're trying to figure out what's going on.
yeah.
Now, so you want to pause a bit in you and your leaders in your organization, you and a mentor, kind of sit back and take a look. And I really recommend looking at those fundamental things first, then start looking at your leadership, then start looking at your team, then look at your strategy, look at your systems and processes, look at how much you're executing, look at whether you're optimizing and innovating, and then look at your mindset. Just sort of tally and say what's going on there. And the reason why I say bring in someone is because the fish don't see the water. So we think, oh no, I'm perfectly fine in leadership. And then all of a sudden, I had a client I brought on, and we did a whole audit of their company. And she was just like, yeah, the team lets me great, but they're not performing well. We did a full interview of all the members of her team. Every last one of them had an issue with her. They did not like her. She had broken trust somehow, and they were feeling. And when you start having it that long, it's very difficult to bring them back. We were able to bring a couple back, but truth be told, it was a problem. So sometimes people don't know how bad things are. So you want to assess each of those things. Once you identify, okay, now keep in mind, it may be all of those things, but some of them are not at the same level. You might have a yellow alert over here, and then you might have like fire over here. Focus on the fire one. It's like triage, yeah? Okay. Focus on the one that's causing you the biggest problem. And then you can't stop the business, because guess what? That's just not how it works. And it's like when a woman's in labor, you can't just say, oh, wait, let's just stop for a moment. The baby's coming. So you can't stop the business. But I like to think of it as sort of, company 1.0, company 2.0. You have company 1.0 running the tracks, doing what you can do to make it work, to make sure you can continue to pay the bills. Company 2.0, you bring in your own assessment. Okay, we realize that this is the problem right here. We're going to start building out what it could look like to fix that problem. Once you've kind of strategized, you've gone all the way down to some sort of implementation, and that, then you move it over into company 1.0. And then you start fixing again and move it over to company 1.0, because you can't just stop. However, you do need to focus on it. You do need to address it, and it's not okay. And I start talking, it's like there's 4 major things that usually pop up that I consider symptoms of chaos. And usually they're, cash flow issues. Usually the company's not scaling. They've been around for a bit, but they're still not scaling. When I say scaling, I mean they are growing, but they're not scaling. There's no gap between the revenues and you're growing at the same amount of your expenses. Another issue is a team. And then the other issue is basically the owner, the CEO, the founder is wearing so many hats, they can't step away from the business without feeling like it's going to implode. So those 4 things are usually the big ones. Of course, there's many other symptoms. Those 4 things are the top 4 reasons why businesses fail. I want to say that again. Those top 4 things are the top reasons why businesses fail. So depending upon the stage of business that you are in, yes, and what's going on, if those things are perpetual chaotic problems, then these are not things to ignore. These are not things to be like, oh yeah, I'll put some Windex on it. This is where you're going to go ahead and you're going to go straight to the emergency room. You're going to fix it, because what will end up happening is long term, it will run your business out. Failure rate for business is 70% at the 10-year mark. That's not because some people out there don't know what they're doing. It's because they failed to address a problem that was consistently becoming perpetual in their business.
And that's interesting. So if you're just now tuning in, we're here talking to Kerry Ann Powell, and she is a business strategist expert when it comes to helping businesses scale and grow. But and on that note, we want to double down on that idea, because it was kind of towards the end, that idea of what's the difference between growing and scaling. I really want you to double down on that, because I think so many companies don't know the difference, or I'm not gonna say the company, holistically, but there's certain key leaders that don't understand that concept, and then it affects the whole company. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics, because it's just one of those things where I'm just like, well, you're growing. I'm really happy for you. But see what happens is, so here's the thing. Just for definitions, we're all on the same page. Yes. Growth is when your revenue is increasing at the same rate as your expenses. So you are bringing in more clients, more customers, all that good stuff. Money is coming in. You're growing. And frankly, to be honest, you need to celebrate that. That's big. That's good. So it's not about poo-pooing that concept where you are. We all have to have a growth stage. However, scaling is when your revenue is increasing at a higher rate than your expenses. Not so that your expenses can't increase while you are scaling. However, there needs to be a huge gap. It needs to be a widening gap between your revenues and the expenses. And that is where, when you start talking, I don't know if you've heard the term hockey stick on people's charts, that's sort of a lingo that people throw out there. I often say, I always like to think of it more like, the shape of the hockey stick, where you're on a chart, you're like, okay, growth, and then bam, scale, right? I like to think of it more like scaling a mountain, all about trying to create new analogies. So, if you're in the valley, then you're at the inflection point, that's the foot of the hill. And then bam, you're up in the mountain. It's the same concept. When you look at your charts. So again, when I say scale light, I do mean scale like, trimming the fat. I also mean scale, meaning there should be some light where you can look and see your numbers all the time. You should love it, embrace it, experience it. It should be your friend. Even if you don't think you're a mathy person, say you're the talent in the business, and that's fine. You need to have someone who you trust, know, love, who can bring it to you on a regular and be like, okay, here are your numbers, right? Because in the end, you got to pay attention, because that's the only way you're going to know if you are indeed scaling. So that's really the difference. Now, one of the challenges with scaling is that, let me just put some stats out there for you. We all know the Inc. 5000, yes? We all want to be on that list because it's fantastic. It shows that you're cool. Did you know 2 out of 3 of the folks that get to the Inc. 5000, meaning they have been anointed by somebody saying, you are scaling, you are growing, God bless you. You are the person we all should look at. I mean, I remember the Inc. magazine, I would always have the little issue when they show all the people, and I would just like, oh, precious. Like the ring from Lord of the Rings. Nonetheless, right? 2/3 of those people, those companies, either fail completely, get bought out adversely, or shrink within 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
Of hitting scale. So this is not a thing where you're like, oh, well, okay, Kerry Ann, thanks for telling me. Not right now. I'm going to work real hard and scale my company all crazy, because the reason why I like to use the mountain is because when you start scaling, it's a very dangerous game. You can start scaling outside of your team's capacity. Next thing you know, you're burnt out, your team's burnt out, ain't anybody happy. Okay. I tried to do that early in my business. I just want you to know I have personal experience with that. Okay. You can do it where you're not able to fulfill the client, the customers. So you say, oh, we're going to scale this year. Yeah, 10x, blah, blah, blah. Right. Next thing you know, your manufacturers can't keep up. I was talking to a lady, and they had this fantastic pet treats. She had 5 different things, and it was just like, Target was looking at bringing her on board, the whole thing. I mean, fantastic, fantastic Black woman. I was like, go ahead, sister girl. But the problem was, if she started to go with the contract with Target, she had 4 different manufacturers producing all of her products. Plus, one of the products required 2 different ingredients of the foods. I mean, I'm not a pet food person, but so one was coming from one manufacturer in China and the other was coming from the US. So she was going to have to basically, they were going to have to be able to increase their capacity to fulfill her needs in a way that could then hit the needs for Target. I'm sorry, but let's think about that. If you cannot scale, if you're scaling, you're like, oh no, we're going to scale this year, or, we have a whole big thing, and then you can't fulfill the customer, fulfill the actual product, that's a big time problem. So that's another thing to consider. Another thing you need to consider is really the truth. I heard someone say this and I love it, so I've been stealing it, and I don't remember who said it, so I can't give them credit. So
it's yours now.
But if you are more important, the more important you are to your business, the less important, the less valuable. Here it is. The more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is. So when you start looking at scaling, if you're in the business that means that you're working in the business even more. So then we start talking about burnout, one of the top 4 reasons for businesses to fail. We start looking at too many hats. So therefore, if you're going to scale, I really believe in scaling strategically. And I also want to say, just because you're growing, it doesn't mean that you're scaling. And that's my soapbox. I'm taking off of that.
Okay. So one of the I think the most important things, or one of those important things also to include with understanding the difference between growth and scaling is, okay, if you're scaling or if you're growing, one of the most important is a team. Can we talk a little bit about, how to attract and maintain a rock star team? As you mentioned before, go to a bunch of A people. You don't want no C's and D's. You need A type leaders. How do you go about attracting and maintaining that type of structure in your business?
Well, first things first, you got to be clear about what your business is. If you're hodgy-podgy about what the vision is and what you're doing and that kind of stuff, and I know that you might think, well, Carrie Ann, I got a pretty strong business and whatever. That's fine. I was having a conversation with a man who's at a business for 11 years. And I had a conversation with him just last week. I'm telling you, it took me 20 minutes to understand what he does. Okay. He could not articulate to me.
It wasn't simple, huh?
Come on. So you got to have, real clarity and communication. You got to have a vision for where you want to take the company. And I'm talking about core strategic goal. We sometimes hear people say a BHAG, right? You need to have that thing real clear so that you can attract people who are excited about what it is that you're doing. Okay. If you don't have that great excitement vision, you don't have to be a cool company like Google or whoever the coolest company is now to work for, that you can have a vision, because humans, and don't buy into this hogwash around people are lazy, people don't want to work, blah, 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 blah. It's a bunch of hogwash. Human nature has not changed. And human nature is people want to work for companies, for projects, for big ideas that are bigger than themselves. If they can find something that's inspiring to them, they want to be a part of it. Okay. So it's your job as the leader to come up with to be able to communicate. Because sometimes, looky here, you can have a great company that might be fantastic, but you got to be able to communicate, is what I'm saying as well. Okay. So there's that first step first. Secondly, I don't believe you have to go to, say, Harvard or Morehouse or, Howard, and recruit like the top of the class people and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
I don't know why you said Morehouse like that. Why you said Morehouse like that?
Meaning, like,
I'm messing with you.
Are you a Morehouse man?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I respect it. That's what I'm saying. So you don't need to have, you don't need to go to some hoity-toity school to have them recruit the top of the class. What you do need, though, is a certain type of person you do need. And it's a person who is self-motivated. Now, obviously, you can't hire someone that's completely inept. However, you need to be first focused on, is this person a self-motivated person? You don't want to be dragging people. You want people to drag you. I have members in my team that I'm just like, whoa, hold on. They're doing some crazy stuff. And I'm just like, oh my Lord. You want that kind of thing. Why? Because if you have someone who's self-motivated, you can always train them. You can always show them what it is we do here. Now, of course, there's some particular things that you do need some skill sets to bring on, and you do want people who are good at top of their game. But in the end, the core thing is you can have someone that's top of their game, but not self-motivated. And then, that's just a hot mess. It really doesn't work very well. So that's number 2. Number 3, when you start thinking about the positions in your company, don't get tempted to hire based on personality or whatever the thing is, or you need this need, so let me find someone to fill the gap. First things first, whether or not you are a small business and you only have a couple of people right now, or it's just you, whether you're a mid-sized company and, things are going crazy, always go back to the org chart. And I know it's not, sexy to talk about org charts because it's like, these are boxes, whatever. Go back to the roles that people are playing, meaning what is the need of the organization? Let's think about the organization as an entity outside of oneself. And what does this entity that is designed to generate value for its stakeholders. And all of the stakeholders include you, the owner, you've got the employees, you've got the customers, you've got the investors. So there's a bunch of stakeholders, right? So what does this entity need in order to thrive, to generate the value that it's supposed to generate? And then you begin kind of creating the boxes, the roles within the organization. Then you begin to really start looking at the job is always re-audit your job descriptions, like be anal retentive about the job description and the type of personality that needs to be able to, that can thrive in that particular job. Then you start going out there looking for someone that could fly. Sometimes you're in the trap. Now, if you're the one interviewing, don't fall in this trap. If you have an HR person that's interviewing, don't let them fall into the trap of like, oh, we have this whole thing. We know the characteristics we're looking for. We know that, and then we have someone that comes in that's really great personality. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that person's gonna be great for the job, right? Like, stick to the script. Okay. The fundamental thing, of course, is self-motivated. And then from there, you start looking at, okay, this personality type that would work well in this position. Can the person do the job? And can the person do the job long-term? Meaning the position, do you think it will fill their fire? Or is it one of those things that, like, you don't want to get an introvert in a job that's sales? Like, I mean, that's brain. I know that sounds silly. And you're like, well, of course I wouldn't do that, Carrie Ann. I'm a savvy business owner. I can't tell you people are companies and they're just sitting in weird seats. I'm like, well, what happened here? So that's what you want to do. You first want to think about the top of it is what's the vision? Why would someone want to work for your company? And it needs to be bigger than just a paycheck. I know that I'm sorry. You do need to pay people well. I'm going to assume that whoever's listening to this podcast knows they need to pay people well. Okay. And so there's that. So you need to pay people well. Pay people well. Just, pay people well. Okay. But assuming that you are paying people well, you do definitely need to have people who, what else would get people attracted to work for you? And it's definitely, you don't have to start thinking, oh, I'm going to the highest bid on the salary range. What you want to be thinking about is what makes your place something that's special and gives them the opportunity. I like to think of a business as a microcosm of society. Are you giving people an opportunity to express their giftings in a place that's safe, a place that they can be able to just sort of run rabid with everything that they love to do and just kind of, do it. And also you really do need to have a culture there of collaboration. Just sort of, top down stuff doesn't work. It never has, just don't. But that's kind of some of the things. But the big thing is though, getting the right self-motivated people into the seats on the bus so that everyone is positioned right. And if everyone is positioned in the right role, then you're not really managing people, you're leading people. You're managing systems, okay, but you're leading people. And that to me is way better, I think.
I agree. I definitely agree. Early in the conversation, we talked, I feel as if you talked extensively about the strategic planning and execution. One area I think that we left out, because I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm telling you for a fact, Carrie Ann, like there's so many startups and all these, new innovations, new technologies. But why is it important for these startup founders to have an exit plan? No one ever thinks about an exit plan. Why is that so important in today's
Brandon, you're speaking my language. I personally, it's, when I talk about the fundamental, the foundational things of the big idea concept, the exit plan is in that fundamental thing. There's a couple of reasons why you need to have an exit plan. Okay. One reason is if you can develop a strong exit plan that's clear, you're going to build a company a certain way based on your plan to exit. So for instance, if your goal is to sell the company by several multiples, you're building the business a little differently, don't you think? You're much faster in kind of putting yourself out of a job. You're creating better structures and systems and processes in place that are scalable, repeatable, so it's more attractive for someone to purchase it. If you want to leave your company to your family members, you begin to build a company differently, right? You're bringing in the folks sooner. You're bringing in we're bringing in the people sooner. We're bringing in your team, the young people in your family sooner. You're doing a lot of things differently than you would than if you were building it to sell. I had a conversation with a company, and it broke my heart, to be honest, because it was kind of lower. Where they came in to start talking to me was at a place where I was beginning to wonder if they were going to be able to accomplish the goal that they were wanting to accomplish. This company was built, I think they probably had been in business for about 30 years or so. I can't remember, like the 30 years. They had about 50 plus employees. It was founded by one person. However, early days, another person came in the business as sort of the, sort of COO, and they both kind of built the company together. So in the business, basically, is the business is I'm going to say it was like 80% of the business was made up of family members from each of the individual folks. Okay. Now, they're all now wanting to retire, and they all, the first generation of folks, and they're wanting to retire, and they want to retire now, like within 5 years of retirement. However, they had done a couple of things, like for instance, one of the owner and the founder, he brought in one of his I think children or grandchildren or something, and started like bringing them in the business, and she was going to university to train in the business and that kind of thing. However, there was some question if that was going to work, if she was even still interested and that kind of thing. So at this point in time, here's this company that's running. It's actually at the top of its game in the industry that it's in. But the whole first upper rung of the company in terms of generationally and leadership, there's no plan. They just started having conversations with the insurance. They just started an insurance policy because, if you're trying to build, a lot of people don't know this, but if you're trying to leave your company to your children, you need to have some financial things in place. And I'm not, I'm an attorney, but I'm not an attorney that's giving advice right now, and I'm not a financial person. But you need to have some insurance policies in place so that you can, when you retire, you can have a salary coming in, and then there's also funding in order to support. You also want to do that if you're a business partner, and I'm sure many of you are smart and you've been doing it, but I'm just putting it out there. There needs to be insurance products within your business that provide in case one gets sick and the thing and whatever. Okay. So in order for you to be able to leave your business to a thriving business to your family, there are some things that need to happen financially, a kind of further along the line and early days if possible. And they had just started that process. So it was really, I really was a bit heartbroken because I figured we could help them create a better plan and that kind of stuff and get them moving forward. But it was kind of one of those things. I'm like, I don't think you're going to be able to retire in 5 years. We're going to be like a 10-year out thing. And they're like, we want to get out of here, because they're getting older. They want to live their lives, whatever. And so, but even if you're thinking about selling it, for instance, one of my aunts, because we come from this weird hodgepodge of a family, a little bit entrepreneurial, a little bit too academically elite. So I don't know what we are, but nonetheless, one of my aunts, she had this great career as an educator. Okay, when she retired, she started a school for more like a preschool, I guess. Okay, and it was sort of boutique, so it's not very large, but they had families that followed her. So like all the children, came through this school. So eventually she decided to a few years, maybe like a year or two ago. Keep in mind, she had this strong loyalty of these families. She had a strong reputation in the community. She had all of the resources, the chairs, the books, all of the actual, stuff. And she just closed down shop when she was ready. No process, no selling of anything. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Even if you just sold the list,
book of business,
that would have done something. So my heart broke when I heard about that. So that's one of the reasons why you want to definitely have an exit plan, is because first you build a business based on the exit plan that you have. And then secondly, you want to also be thinking about when you have an exit plan to get out of the business, you kind of you become, there's a certain amount of clarity that I find that business owners who say, yeah, we're building this and we're going to sell it in 6 years, have around scaling. I feel like it's a motivating factor for them. They begin to run the business a little bit smoother. So therefore, those things that we talked about, which are number one reasons, the top reasons why people fail, they tend to not come, like they are already addressing those particular things while they're operating in the business. And I think that really does help to make a better business, even if you never decide to sell. And the other option too, I wanted to just sort of say, we talk about, exit strategies. One strategy might be that the folks coming up in the business might decide to buy you out. If you have a strong team, I've seen that happen. If you have a strong team, they're wanting to, the second sort of leadership rung might buy it out. And this happens a lot. I mean, there's this fantastic restaurant in New York City that I love watching, those sort of shows where they do like, business stuff, like, and the whole reason why the company right now is owned by the two individuals. One was a chef that worked there, another individual, and he's like, there was a junior staff that moved up to the ranks. The two of them ended up buying the restaurant. The restaurant was like now number one in the world. So there are many ways that you can you can exit a business. And it might be a situation too where I think it's Ishak Cadiz, he's a big sort of business mogul, thought thinker, thought leader, and he talks about this kind of the four types of leaders in a company, and one of which is the entrepreneur, and the timeline by which that person exists in the company. There's the entrepreneur, kind of goes this way a little bit. Coming underneath it is sort of the implementer, and then right underneath it is the sustainer. I think there's a fourth one. This idea of, if you can build your company where you're bringing in people who are, so if you're really the entrepreneur, like your personality type is the entrepreneur, then you start bringing leaders into your company that can be the implementer, that can be the sustainer. And therefore, you when it's time for you to go build something else, which is what entrepreneurs like to do, right? What's the next project? And then the next one, you've got a solid base to be able to keep it going.
All right. So I know we're getting ready to run out of time, but there's one more question. Well, two more questions I got to ask. And I mean, we couldn't even do justice if we didn't ask these next questions. All right. So how important is aligning your personal enjoyment and spiritual well-being with your work, your business life? Because, they always say you got to find balance and everything. But oftentimes, and I'm just being real, like, when you're trying to build a business, there's not a balance. Like hey, this is what I need and I'll have to do right now. So, but I know that thinking or being that way, I'm saying that because I've done it myself, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the best way of doing things. What's your insight on that?
This goes back to the fundamental thing I talked about. What is your life plan? What do you want? What's the vision here? Particularly if you're, if you're still working in the business, even if you're the CEO, the chairman of the board, so you're sort of, building yourself out of the business. If you're building a business, and it should be really aligned to you and your life plan, and is the value coming out of the business supporting that? I don't find any other way to do it, to be honest with you. If you're building something, eventually at some point, your life plan no longer matters in the business and it becomes an own entity. But for a lot of years, the owner, the founder of the business, still, is in it, and their life does need to be the central part about what it looks like. So I just want to say that fundamentally, that's my belief around building a business. However, like the day to day, what are can you have balance per se? Yeah, I think you can. Who was it? Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank thinks no. He's all about the, suffer and die. I mean, I'm like, you had a really hard life, didn't you? I'm not on his end. I think that you can. I believe in building a business. One of the things I talk about scaling is scale at your own pace. Okay, I think build a business based on your own pace. If you look and see that John over there is building this thing and it's scaling at this and he's all in it, but that's not what you want. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Build at your own pace. Now, let me just put it here, a point that I want to just make. I like to think there's like 3 types of businesses. Yeah. You've got the side hustle. So you got a full-time job and you got something on the side. Okay. That's a perfectly fine way of generating additional revenue in your business, in your life. And you might eventually move into your side hustle as a full-time thing, but there's a side hustle. Then you've got sort of the lifestyle business meaning that you are building a company to support your lifestyle. That's what most sort of mom and pop shops were back in the day. But a lot of folks are building them online now. But the whole concept of, we're building a business to support our lifestyle. And then you've got growth companies. Most of the folks that work with me are building a growth company. So they want to build something that's going to have some legacy, that's going to have something to last. However, you can figure out which kind of company you want to build along the lines here. And there's a lot. Let me just tell you, there is a whole group of experts out there that talk about how to build a lifestyle company and still make tons of money. So it's not to say that because your lifestyle company means you can't build a significant amount of money and let it grow, but it's still a different style of a company. And if that's what you want, that's also something to consider. And again, it's no shame in the game. However, if you are building a growth company, there are stages of business where some things are happening. And if they may seem chaotic at that particular time, but might not be as bad if it was at a different stage. So I think a part of your role is to be able to assess what's my life plan, what's the business vision, what type of business am I developing, and what do I need to do at different stages in order to get it moving. If you are, though, again, goes back to, is it perpetually chaotic? If you are finding that you cannot step away from your business without feeling like it's going to implode for a very, 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 very long time, there is a problem. It's just a fact. There's a problem happening. You need to go back to the 8 things I mentioned and assess what exactly is happening in there. It might be a mindset thing. I heard TD Jakes interview with somebody and he said, that there's a culture of hustle that that we are ingrained in. And sometimes because you don't I think the concept that he was trying to get to basically was sometimes people feel that they're not hustling, if they're not, on the grind or something, they don't feel significant. Their identity is attached to this concept of the hustle and the grind. That might be something that you might want to work with, a therapist or someone sort of, separate that out. Building a business is not easy, but there should be no suffering. Suffering is when you attach certain meaning to the particular thing that you're confronting. So there needs to be a separation of that and recognizing, look, we all bring our own baggage, trauma, all that kind of stuff into building a business. I like that wherever you are, there you are. So you do need to kind of process that. But there are stages of business where you're going to be on the grind for a bit, but then it shouldn't be perpetual. So you need to assess what's going on.
So make some correction in your sales. So lastly, and this is so important. This is one of the reasons why we connected. One of the reasons that I went to Morehouse was because of Dr. King. And, so my question to you, how did leading a small team, like what did that look like to raise $120 million for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial? And inform us on your views on the business strategies that developed as a direct result of this particular situation.
Yeah. First of all, that was like one of the most fulfilling experiences of not just my career, but my life. And it's something that I hold very dear, in being a part of building that memorial. And every time I go back to DC and I sit down, and it's just, it's really very close and dear to my heart. However, I would say there's so many lessons, so many lessons. But one thing I will say that that cemented, I had been doing strategic planning and doing strategy from very, very early in my career, just because of the opportunities that I had. But let me just say, the importance of having a strong strategy and having a way to implement and execute, and being willing to track and being willing to pivot when things don't work, that was cemented and hammered in to me during that time. Because there was an overall strategy, there were tactics that we were putting into place, that some of the tactics worked, some of them didn't. We're quick to pivot, quick to try, willing to be open to different tactics, because this is something where you're not selling a product per se. You are asking people to part with their money, for an ideal. And so this is why I don't care who comes to me like, oh, well, my product is just so complicated that it's very difficult to articulate it in sales. I'm like, yeah, try selling granite on the National Mall. Okay. So my point is here, you can sell anything. However, you do need a strong strategy, and you need the ability to have a strong execution plan, and you need the capacity to be able to pivot, and don't be going into the feelings when things go wrong. A couple years I think I had several years where I was bringing in 20 million a year, just like bam, bam, bam. The team and I, we were just like, we're doing it. And then when we had the crisis, I might have brought in 100,000. Okay. We had to pause at one point because there was a threat, a threat assessment, so they had to, the entities within Washington that govern, the safety of the memorials, basically required us to sort of create a whole nother design to address domestic terrorism. That took a year. I can't tell you. Can imagine being in business and you had a stall in the year and you're still trying to sell something that's not happening. You can't be in your feelings. Okay. So there are a lot of things that I learned in that process that really are true. And so when I talk, I'm not doing theory. I'm not about the theory. Okay. I know the theory is, but there are some realities to face. And I think one of the things is, if you are just willy-nillying doing your business, I'm sorry, if you don't have a core strategic goal, meaning 15 years out, if you don't have clear values in your business, if you're not really measuring and tracking the things that you're doing on a day-to-day, you're not building a business. You're building a business that something else is going to create for you. You're going to land there and wonder, how did we get there? And those are some of the things that I've learned really because of the work that we were doing to kind of build that. And let me just say too, it was 120 million to build it, but then we had to do another 8 million for the celebratory process of it, right? Because there's heads of state and people heads of state coming to celebrate this thing. Okay, so it's not, you can't just say, oh, we're gonna have a party at McDonald's, right? It's not. So and also too, the other thing too is everyone always looking like, oh, there's two other things I would say. There's so many lessons I could have told you, but one thing I will say, the year we dedicated, the year we were supposed to be finished with the memorial, the actual year we dedicated, I was still I was still 10 million out from the goal, the 120. And we still hadn't raised the 8 million. And we were still waiting on the budget for the for the dedication. So I was like, okay, at least we got to bring in the 10 million. That's what I'm thinking and focused on. And then we got, we had to do, obviously the RFPs for the event planners and blah, blah, blah. We finally got the final bid. And I was like, so you want us to raise $18 million in 6 months? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I just want to understand, like, that's what's happening. So, you really have to be able to, so that you could have, like, it was easy. I could have said to myself, I'm going to just go ahead and put my head in the sand and put the covers over. It's not possible. So one thing one must have, this goes back to mindset. You do need to believe, even if you believe just a tiny, tiny bit, you have to believe I can do this. Even if it's a tiny, tiny bit, there needs to be something within you that says, I got this, or else, and each step you take gets you to, I got this. And then you feel like I got this even more, because you're going to get to points in your business where there's big things you're going to have to do, and there's big, heavy lifts. It's, sometimes it can be smooth sailing, and all of a sudden, bam, you got to do something, you got to stretch. And that's what, that's what God wants for us. He wants us to stretch and to expand and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really think any of this is all about just business. However, I will say, and then the other thing that I would just put out there, you sort of talk about the lessons I learned, one of which was simply this. One lesson is simply this. When I talk about team, and, it sounds highfalutin, and it sounds ethereal, and it sounds, Carrie Ann's not on the ground, or she's somehow working with companies that are just clearly not, the best companies. I am not like just wishful thinking. You can build a team that actually truly, and it doesn't have to be about building the Martin Luther King Memorial. You can build a team with some that believes in whatever the product is you're selling, even if it's just dog food, you know what I mean? Whatever the thing you're selling, you can build a team that you can't pay them any more money that would get them to do more than what they're doing. I have a strong memory, and I'm going to leave you with this. I remember I had been able to, I've been working really hard to try to get, there's basically two large trucking companies in the US. Yeah. There's a YRC, and I think there's Worldwide. I think those are the two big trucking companies. And for international listeners, a large part of the way that we transport stuff in the US is still through large semis. Okay. So in the rest of the world, they use trains. But we use large semis. So you can imagine these semi trucks. I mean, we all see them on the highway, and they're big, right? So one of the things that I was trying to pitch to, we had this program called the Kids for King program. And it was an educational program for teachers to use talking about Dr. King in their classrooms, but it was also a way for them to learn philanthropy. So there was like a fundraising entity to it, right? Okay, fine. And let me just tell you, those children raised some money. Okay, I'm just saying. But nonetheless, so we had the program. One of the things that we did was, ask YRC to be able to wrap a couple of their semis with the promotional materials of the Kids for King program. It had been it was months and months of negotiating and talking and communicating and blah, 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 like anything in life. They finally said yes. Okay. I was like cock-a-hoot. I was so excited. And so we had a whole press conference we were doing on the National Mall. If you have international listeners, the National Mall is basically it's a piece of land that you see on the movies between the Capitol and the Lincoln Memorial, and you've got the Washington Monument in the middle of it. It's a bunch of land. Okay. So that's where the memorial is on the National Mall. It's a big deal. It's where we have our presidents, and it's where we have our veterans of war. The Martin Luther King Memorial still remains the first and only memorial of a person that's not a president or a veteran of war. So this is a big deal for our country. Okay, fine. So the National Mall, though, there's some rules around what you can do and say. So first of all, having a press conference in the National Mall requires a great deal of, pleading and begging and negotiating. Okay, fine. They said yes. All right, fine. But what they did say was that we're not about, because you can't have a semi truck on the National Mall. I'm sorry, you just don't do that. I mean, that's just not what we do. However, they were willing to say yes, but the truck had to come in by 5 a.m. Of course, before rush hour traffic starts, because you can't have a semi truck running around, people trying to get to work at the White House. Okay, so we were like, okay, that's fine, that's cool. So I'm a girly girl. Okay, so I had my heels. I was looking cute. Me and my other colleague, my other two colleagues, we were actually all three women. It's so funny, and we all three were girly girls. So we're all with the heels and blah blah blah. Down at the National Mall at 5 a.m. And then when we got there, though, at 4:30 a.m., because that's what you do. And we're just waiting, we're setting things up, and I'm waiting for the truck. And now keep in mind, it was going to be the Secretary of Education was going to be there. The CEO of the YRC was going to be there. Of course, my president was going to be there. This is not a situation where you want to mess this up. Yeah. And the truck was going to be the backdrop for it all, because that's the whole point of having the truck on it. So anyway, we're there, and, obviously the guy can't call so much because he's driving, but then he did call and say, I'm lost, because if anyone's been to Washington, they know the streets were paved by, I don't know, a paths. There's no So he's like, I'm lost, I can't figure out how to do it. So we're trying to show him where we are, we're a clip of the title bases, whatever. I see that darn truck past the entrance, and if he would, it's a one-way street, so once he went, he was going to have to go all the way around and then come back, and he was going to miss the timeline, and the park police were going to say no, because they don't play. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this cannot happen. So here I am in my cute shoes, my cute outfit, the hair, DC has humidity. So, and the three of us are running down the National Mall to get this man's attention, to get him to back up. Go around. You gotta back up. Okay. I don't know if you know anything about semis. They have the capacity to do some crazy things. I learned that day. He finally saw us and then stopped, backed up, did a weird sort of turnaround thing. And anyway, got there. Everything was fine. It was a good press conference and everything was happening. You couldn't pay me. I'm just saying, I did that because I believed in what it was we were doing.
You were doing,
There were people that will run into walls for you to build this company if you give them the tools, the environment, the support, the accolades, the money, and the vision. They will run into walls for you. But if they're not doing it, it's because you did something wrong. You need to figure it out and fix it. And that's the lesson I learned from building Memorial.
Wow. That's powerful. That's a moment there. It's been, we've definitely had a incredible conversation today. So I want to really, truly and sincerely thank you, Kerry Ann. But what I need you to do right now, if you don't mind, can you please share with the people how they can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So, couple things. That's my speaker's page for sure. So you can definitely find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm actually a real person. So you can definitely reach out to me and say hello. Say, look, I'm a part of Brandon's crew. So hey, and let's connect. Let's connect, because I really believe in human beings just connecting. I also, I have my website. You can reach our business website. It's trafalgarstrategies.co, trafalgarstrategies.co.com. So you can find me there. But if you're one of the people who was like, we were stepping on some toes, Brandon and I kind of offended you a bit, this conversation, then you need to sit down and really assess. If you think you want to assess what really is going on, then go to nobusinesschaos.com. Okay. Nobusinesschaos.com. Put your name and your email address, download that PDF, sit down and just read through it. It's a quick read, okay? And the title of it is the 8 True Culprits That Are Causing Chaos in Your Business. I want you to just assess what the situation's looking like in your business. Remember, those chaotic things we talked about, the symptoms, the top 4 reasons why businesses fail. So it's not something you want to play with. Figure it out, read this, take a look, see which one of those culprits are really what's showing up red in your business. Start to fix it. Okay. Just pick one. Don't be trying to fix everything. Just pick one and start fixing it. Remember my analogy of, company 1.0, company 2.0, keep your business going, but spend some time doing company 2.0, fix a thing, move it into company 1.0. You keep doing that. Eventually you'll be able to address and have a business that's thriving and you're running smoothly and you're enjoying your life.
Wow. I'm truly inspired. And if you've been inspired by Kerry Ann's words and want to dive deeper, we've got additional resources and links in the show notes, including a full summary of this particular podcast. So before we wrap up, let's quickly recap on some takeaways from today's episode. We've learned so much about, the balancing act of scaling your business. In what she did, she kind of dived in and made sure that we understood and, how to differentiate between what's the difference between growing and scaling. Because, sometimes we can be so smart in our own ways of thinking that we don't even see the most obvious things. So just her breaking that down, because I never looked at it that way, Kerry Ann. So, you open up my eyes, the difference between growth and scaling. A lot of people, and I know I wasn't the only one, I'm like, they kind of synonymous, it's kind of the same thing. But when you broke it down, it was like, nah, that's not the same thing. So that insight, really, and that's what these conversations are about, real talk for real people, thought leaders out there. Just hearing your story just transcends on so many levels. So we are truly honored. And I think anyone that hears this podcast will truly be honored to be anointed by your words today. So we don't take it lightly. So you talked a lot about that balancing act of scaling your business, the necessities of strategic planning, and the importance of aligning your personal well-being with your business goals. And you kept, talking about that life plan and how that aligns with your business. So, if you guys looking on the screen right now, these are some of the reviews that Kerry Ann has got, and we got to continuously edify those that, come on this platform for no reason. She, I'm not paying her to do this. She came on her own free will and accord to be here to drop knowledge to this audience, to help business owners, leaders, thought leaders, CEOs, wannabe CEOs to understand that these are things that you need. And Kerry Ann, real quick before we close out, this one thing I wanted to say, I know that the services that you offer, they're not necessarily the cheapest out there, but what a person or what a business will pay by either hiring an amateur or not hiring anyone at all is I would say that is probably triple the amount you would have to pay instead of hiring an expert like yourself to really give them that insight into their business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I recognize that depending upon, again, the stage of business that you are in, it's you have the resources or you don't have the resources, and you're trying to balance what's happening. But here's the thing. Here's what I have found. There are a lot of people out there that are, peddling certain things. And I have found that what ends up happening is people are either saying, I can do it myself. Okay. And then what ends up happening is they spend more time, because time is money. They spend more time and they spend more money, because money is money. And they still haven't been able to address the real core problem of what's going on in the business. And when you have that situation that's happening, it really does, it rates on someone's spirit. You know, I don't do this just because, I love strategy. I do love strategy. I could talk it all day, to be honest. But I love people. I love business owners. I think entrepreneurship is holy stuff. I think running a business is sacred because you're not just doing something for yourself and for your family. You are hiring people. You are providing a product and a service. And if it's grating on you and you're always dealing with problems, the emotions that you connect to your business is always going to be problems. And that emotions, our life is about emotions. When you think about it, we don't remember a lot of things, but remember the feelings that we had about a thing. Yeah. And we think of a period of time in our life, it's like, oh, that was horrible. You don't remember the exact thing, but you remember the emotions. And if the emotions that you're having are always exhaustion, always frustration, always tiredness, then your business is not fun. And I believe in enjoying life. And I believe that our birthright is abundance. So I think too, if you're just trying to do it on your own, now there's some things you can do on your own, but if you're finding you're doing it, it's not working, I think it's really good time to sort of start reaching out and getting some help, because you end up wasting time, which is money, and you end up wasting money, which is money. And then you end up having perpetually feeling like exhaustion, frustration, and overwhelm. And if you go with someone who, even if you can't find, like you go with someone who you think is going to be more affordable, which, I mean, look, some folks out there are doing good jobs and they're charging a lot. So that's all I'm saying. But you have to be able to make sure the person can do it. Just because someone has been able to build a business doesn't mean that they can actually help you build a business. It's sort of like, not because someone has done a thing means that they can actually teach you how to do it. There is a certain amount of skill set to be able to strategic and assess what's going on in your business and then be able to help you build it. And so you just want to be really, really diligent. And then the other thing I think is I would say probably more from a spiritual aspect. We often think when we begin to live in lack, when we begin to live in lack as if we do not have, it puts us in a position where we're always feeling like we live in lack. And therefore we can't expand, we can't stretch, we can't move forward. And I think that is permeates other aspects of our lives and our business. So I think a part of it is recognizing that you may not, if you feel like when you're talking about money, people always get a little bit uncomfortable because we all have a money story, and the money story is real and true, but it is a story nonetheless. And so if you can begin to conquer that and walk in what is more a story that's more abundant, if you begin to get the rewards. And I was like that too. I had to really do some work on my own money story. I found myself staying small for a long time before I decided I was just gonna I cannot live in this money story. I feel like I'm being trapped. And so I had to do my own work. So again, we all are on our different journeys. We're all on the path. But that's what I would say. I don't want to sound like I'm preaching or whatever, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you're just speaking from a place of expertise, and I believe you're speaking from your heart. So to me, I think anyone in the sound of your voice could feel that. So at the end of the day, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. So, hey guys, if you've really enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us bring more content that you love and expert guests like we have today. Stay tuned for the next episode where we will continue to explore strategies, systems, mindsets that will propel you into the future of success and fulfillment. You won't want to miss it. Until then, keep thinking forward, take action, and remember, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. I'm Brandon L. Draper, better known as